Alright, I don't want to fall into the trap of overhyping the last track of the album, but it really is the track I've put the most time, effort, and absolute nerdistry into, so let's just hop right into it. The track's name is Testimonium Calumnia, which translates to slanderous evidence, and I'll get into the why of that later. The song has three main components that play either interchangeably or in combination with one another. We have a choir, which is standard 16-piece soprano, alto, tenor, bass. We have a full orchestra, so about 100 members give or take, and then a band, which is your standard bass guitar, regular guitars, drums, vocals, the works. My compositional challenge with this piece was to try and create something whereupon the choir, the orchestra, or the band could be listened to by themselves and still sound like their own piece, but in combination, you hear something truly glorious. We start with the choir and the orchestra in full force. Eventually, the sopranos and altos leave, leaving the tenor and basses behind, still with the orchestra. The band kicks in for the first time, and we have this massively brutal sound. Then, the orchestra joins for the first solo. It's quite chaotic, but this resolves in the first instance of all three components coming together. It's absolutely huge here. Then we have a classical guitar component before a 13/8 polyrhythm in a Latin-style jam, that eventually transitions into an operatic section with the orchestra rejoining, all three components kicking in again, solo number 2, which is a lot more melodic, and that finally resolves in the finale with all three components coming together again. This is the mix window for the track, and I'm just going to zoom out. As you can see, it is absolutely massive. The track goes for 15 minutes and features 147 channels. That's with me having stripped it down. I'm just going to show you the choir bit first. Here we go. The soprano and alto parts were actually recorded by my mum, and I handled the tenor and bass parts. If it sounded like Latin, you'd be right. So I actually studied Latin in high school for several years, and I was really keen on it. And in this case, what I did was I wrote English prose, translated that into Latin, conformed it to Roman poetic standards as set out by the epics such as the Aeneid and the Iliad, conformed it to Roman poetic standards such as dactylic hexameter and other such expressive techniques, and thus following the example of Baroque classical greats such as Bach, Handel, and Mozart, I then made sure that my choir parts were actually written according to the correct harmonization rules. There's so much more to this track, so I'll catch you in part 2.